There is simply no story about Western civilization that is not bound up with Jesus and Christianity. And yet, the life of the historical Jesus is often presented to us as a kind of pocket universe, isolated, quiet, untouched by the brutal world around us. We imagine a serene Nazareth, a sleepy hamlet straight out of Sunday school coloring books. But here's the truth. To really understand the man from Nazareth, we have to place him in the actual history of first-century Galilee. And frankly, what archaeology reveals is far more surprising and much darker than tradition suggests. Today, I want to take you back in time. I want you to see what Jesus saw when he looked out from his front door. But to do that, we can't start in Nazareth. We have to start with a city just within eyeshot of it, Sepphoris. In the years just before Jesus' birth, Galilee was not a place of peace. When Herod the Great died, a king as impressive as he was brutal, a power vacuum exploded into violence. A rebel leader named Judas broke into the royal palace at Sepphoris and seized control. Rome's response was swift, and it was nightmarish. The governor of Syria, Varus, marched his legions in and destroyed Sepphoris completely. But he didn't stop there. As a warning to anyone who might consider rebellion, he decorated the Galilean countryside with crosses. Some 2,000 crucified corpses lined the roads and hills. Pause and imagine that for a moment. This is the world Jesus was born into. Not a peaceful village isolated from the world, but a tiny community of perhaps a few hundred people living in the shadow of a ruined city and an open-air tomb of Roman violence. Archaeologically, we know Nazareth was tiny. So small, in fact, that it isn't mentioned anywhere in the Old Testament. It doesn't appear in the Talmud. It was, in the words of one scholar, a nowhere place. And in a small village like that, everyone knows your business. There are no secrets. This brings us to something we don't talk about enough. The Gospels hint at the scandals surrounding Jesus' birth, the whispers that followed Mary, the questions that never quite went away. The text calls Jesus a mamzer, a term that doesn't simply mean illegitimate in our modern sense. It meant someone born from a forbidden union, marked by the community. If this was the talk of the village, and scholars increasingly think it was, then Mary, Joseph, and their children would have been pariahs. Imagine a young Jesus growing up knowing that his very existence threatened his family's standing forever. Imagine the weight of that. But here is where the story takes a surprising turn. You know the word tekton from the Greek Gospels. We usually translate it as carpenter, but in first-century Galilee there wasn't much wood to work with. Stone, however, stone was everywhere. Many scholars now believe Jesus was more likely a stonemason or a general craftsperson who worked with whatever materials were available. Why does this matter, you ask? Because while Jesus was growing up, Herod Antipas was rebuilding Sepphoris. He wanted it to be the ornament of Galilee, a showpiece of Roman-style architecture and Hellenistic culture, and to build it, he needed workers. It is highly probable, some would say almost certain, that Jesus and Joseph walked those few kilometers to Sepphoris day after day to labor on the elite's construction projects. He spoke Aramaic in a thick Galilean dialect. When he went to Jerusalem, the elite Southerners mocked the way he talked. They called it oafish, provincial. He knew what it felt like to be talked down to by Roman soldiers in Latin. He knew what it felt like to carry the dust of Herodian quarries home on his skin at night. Now read his parables again, the workers in the vineyard, the day laborers waiting in the marketplace, the master who builds a tower, the servants entrusted with bags of gold. These aren't abstract stories. These are the stories of his neighbors, his co-workers, his own life. So when we ask, what did Nazareth look like in Jesus' time? The answer changes how we read every page of the Gospels. It wasn't a peaceful village. It was a place of deep social stigma. It sat on the periphery of a cosmopolitan Romanized city. It was shaped by the shadow of crosses and the dust of quarries. It was a place where a young boy with a complicated family history grew up building palaces for the very empire that would one day nail him to a tree. And yet from this place, this hard, stigmatized, working-class village on the edge of nowhere, came teachings that would change the world. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not that Jesus came from somewhere grand, but that he came from somewhere so ordinary, so difficult, so human. If this perspective on the world of Jesus resonates with you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. In our next video, we'll explore what Sepphoris itself looked like, and why Jesus seems to have spent so little time teaching in the city he helped build. Thank you for walking through history with me.